I want to say hello to Bob Burns, who is running for U.S. Congress in New Hampshire's 2nd Congressional District. Thank you for coming in for 2 hours.
No, wow, 2 hours.
Oh, it goes by very fast.
Yeah, I'm sure.
For your GrokGauntlet. And as a reminder, we are not journalists. We are political activists with a website. So we will be asking you far different questions than what newspapers or radio stations might ask.
So we're not going to spend 55 minutes on abortion?
No. You are not allowed to filibuster.
Oh.
Because I will stop you. So the normal way we do this, now that you're here, is I will go first, Mike will go next, and then to Rick, and then back, around Robin. And if somebody doesn't have a question, then we just go to the next person. And I will tell you that I never, ever don't have a question ready. So
Hardly ever.
I have no idea.
HMS Pinafore, come on,
Oh.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
No.
Work with me here, Skip.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
I do movie and music quotes.
You're far too refined for us.
Yeah, and you will find that being bloggers,
Gilbert and Sullivan.
we tend to be ADHD as well. Bipolar used to be called manic depressive, so you combine ADHD with manic level, and we can start bouncing all over the place. And we did that when another candidate came in near the end, and that candidate had no idea what was going on. He could just sit there. So with that, I'm going to ask you a relatively simple question, but it is my favorite one that I always use on Granite Croc, which is, what is the proper role of government? That's an open-ended question. It is multi-layered, but I want to see what you can do.
Yeah, sure. So that's a good question. I mean, what I was thinking about is, number one, like Thomas Jefferson says, government that governs least governs best. But we always do need government for a few separate things. Number one, protecting our borders. A country without borders isn't a country, okay? National security, defense, the military, and infrastructure. Those are the main roles of government. But we have learned that we need to live into a society. And I do believe in the 10th Amendment. Although at times we have found that there are laws that make no sense that are governed by one state. Now, I don't like the idea of how that we've put in the law for 21-year-old drinking ages, where we've put, we'll take money from you, then give it back for roads as long as you comply to this. I hate the way that we've done that, but I understand why we did it. And the reason that we did it is because, of course, if you have an 18-year-old drinking age in one state, then you have all these 21-year-old, 18 or 21 in one state and 18 in another state, that you have all these people going from one state to another, sometimes late at night or what have you, that create a social issue. And I understand why they did it that way, but I don't like the way that they did it with the strings attached based on taxes. So the easiest way that I say is why we have a government is for national sovereignty, for defense of the country, and obviously that we have a national tax base and stuff like that to pay for that defense. Does that make sense?
If that's your answer,
That's my answer.
That's what we're going to accept. A follow-up question, when
Sure.
you were talking about the 18-year-olds in one state and 21 years and others, and that having a national age for that was a proper thing to do. How does that play against federalism?
So number one, I never liked the 21 thing. It's never made sense. And with the strings attached based on a tax or a financial benefit for one state, I've never liked it. I've actually felt that as far as federalism goes, quite frankly, there should almost be a national age of being an adult. If it's 18, it's fine, it's 18. You get all your rights as an 18-year-old, or you get all your rights as a 21-year-old. Make your decision. I hate this this parsing it out. I mean, I think what now, to buy cigarettes in New Hampshire, it's 21? I don't even understand that. It makes no sense to me. But then when the federal government gets involved, it makes even less sense to me, as they've done with purchasing of alcohol.
All right, while we're on the subject of federalism and what the federal government can do to us, which by the way mostly it should not, are you in favor of a federally enacted reciprocal carry law? And if so, how should it be enforced?
Yes, I am. Now, how would I like it enforced? I don't think that we should have any laws to carry our guns across any state line. That would be my wish list. How do I think it would be enforced if I were to go into Congress to be able to actually get something passed? Yeah, you're going to get your state license, and then we're going to have reciprocity across all states.
How do you make that work?
Well, it's complicated, obviously. So now with the recent Supreme Court ruling on the shall issues versus will issues versus, I can't remember what the other one's called, like, we might issue.
Shall issue, may issue, and no issue.
No, yeah, exactly. Essentially what New York's been doing. Those have been found unconstitutional. So, if every state were like New Hampshire, which is a shall issue state, I think that we'd be fine. But unfortunately it's not at the moment, and we do hear of states basically saying they're going to defy the recent Supreme Court ruling. So the better question is then, how do we deal with states like New York and California that essentially say they're going to defy it?
And Massachusetts.
And Hawaii and Massachusetts.
And New Jersey.
Right. So we're going to shall issue. And then if you come from a state that absolutely won't issue, then as far as I'm concerned, as a congressman, although I'm not a judiciary, they're not breaking any law by carrying a gun both in their state or across state lines if those states won't issue. But that's up to the judges and that's up to juries. And unfortunately, that's the way that it's going to work out because that's the way our system is. It's unfortunate. We don't have a judicial arm where I can penalize that state. I mean, what is a congressman can't go in and arrest the governor and the legislature of those states? I mean, there is still some state. As a congressman, I'm running for Congress. I'm not running for president or sheriff of the world. So when a state decides to break the law, I'm not sure what I can do about it. The truth of the matter is, the law is that with the recent Supreme Court ruling, it shall issue now. And those should be recognized across all 50 states.
Rick.
All right, so hang on, follow-up question.
We're hanging on.
Assuming that you could pass
Mm-hmm.
a reciprocal carry bill,
Absolutely.
how would you enforce it? Do you think the 14th Amendment is an adequate and proper way of overriding the 10th Amendment?
Well, again, I'm a congressman. I can't enforce anything.
Well, no, but there are laws that are passed and which are then crammed down states' throats based on the 14th Amendment, for example. Yet the 10th Amendment, which seems to have seniority, also says very clearly that the police powers belong to the states.
The police powers belong to the states, but they can't overrule the Constitution. The Supreme Court's made the ruling, but unfortunately at the end of the day, if a state doesn't decide to accept the ruling, I mean, first off, a congressman has no power over forcing a state into anything.
It's not what power maybe that was wrongly asked.
Yeah.
It's not the power of the individual congressman. It's the question of, you make a law,
Mm-hmm.
how shall the federal government ensure that the law that this is actually the law of the land, and should it?
Well, you're getting into like a very scary area here, because
That's what
I don't
we
want to.
do.
I don't want to be the congressman that creates federal strike forces to go into states to take people out on them enforcing or not enforcing laws that I don't agree with. So, I mean, what do we do? Send in the National Guard, the military? No, I wouldn't do that. So unfortunately, it has to be taken care of in the judiciary. We create the laws, the juries and judges are presented with what the laws are. If someone is not in violation of the law by owning a gun, because it's a shout, because everybody shall issue now, and they have a concealed carry weapon, but the state just won't issue them a permit, then that's up for the juries. There's nothing I can do as a congressman, and I'm not going to send in, federal strike forces or the military into states.
We're not talking about strike forces here.
I mean, but what would a congressman do to enforce laws? You can't enforce laws as a congressman.
Would you suggest that the 14th Amendment should be used with the due process clause, etc., to ensure that that people were treated?
But what's the enforcement? What's the enforcement arm? The military?
No, ultimately that has to go up.
The feds?
That has to go up through the judiciary, and that's
right. Exactly.
And that's what's been done in other cases that were tested.
And that's the only way to do it.
Read the 14th Amendment. You have law or some condition that some states don't agree with, and they're mistreating black people or whatever it is. Let's talk about the kind of things the 14th Amendment was designed for. And so the federal government basically says, cease and desist, you will treat these people the same as every other state treats these people. Now, I happen to disagree with using the 14th Amendment that way anyway. The 14th and the 10th are in a kind of tension for a lot of stuff.
Sure.
Okay. I yield, Rick.
The gentleman from Guilford.
Yeah, if you prefer.
Well, he's the gentleman from Hollis.
If you prefer, I have questions from number 4. Steve's got questions sitting in front of me.
No worries. Going back to your role of government, I noticed you mentioned infrastructure. What do you mean by infrastructure?
Well, interstate highways. We do have train systems. The FAA. The airways that we go. We're on the northeastern seaboard. It's the heavily traveled airways in the entire world. Those have to be regulated by the federal government.
So that covers a lot of ground, which leads me to, and your thoughts on how incredibly inefficient and wasteful our government is in doing the most basic tasks.
Oh, absolutely. We're terrible. I work in pharmaceutical manufacturing. I work with the FDA. What the FDA has decided is that they're going to make things so difficult for drug manufacturers in the United States. And the drugs I'm talking about right now are your statins, your blood pressure medications, your diabetes medications, stuff that we take every day. And they felt that it was too difficult for them to regulate, so they pushed it all off overseas to India and China, where we don't have regulations. There's no doubt about it. Government is super inefficient in everything that they do. We have a ton of problems in there, and it's about draining the swamp. We have a chokehold of the people that run the unions, that they're a mafia, and they're destroying this country. We need to break them up. As a freshman congressman, can I break them up? Yeah, absolutely. I'm probably going to roll in there and absolutely change everything overnight. I am legitimately joking right now. But I can try, and having enough people there. And I don't think that it's a Democrat or Republican problem. When we look at this, the overregulation that makes no sense, there's a lot of Democrats and Republicans that agree on this. But there's a lot that go along with the system because they're being paid off by the right people. But I don't think it's a partisan issue. And I think that there's a lot that we can do there. But one of the things that you have to be is knowledgeable about the subject that you're talking about and knowledgeable about these areas. And I think that we have a lot of congressmen that got a law degree. They might know personal injury or something like that, but they don't have real world experience. And I'm somebody with real world experience that can deal with other people with real world experience. And I think that there's Democrats there that understand what's going on. And I think there's Republicans that understand what's going on, where we can break some of these chokeholds and these regulatory departments that the federal government has to actually, break through.
Skip.
Okay. You mentioned infrastructure.
Yes.
The first question.
Bridges.
I know where Skip's going.
Yeah.
He buried Negron on this first round. Oh, shut up.
What enumerated power in the Constitution allows the federal government to even monkey in infrastructure?
I have no idea, and you're probably going to tell me none. But
Well, there is one place, but only one place. And I listened to your answer about infrastructure and building roads and doing this and doing that. There is only one piece of infrastructure that the federal government is allowed to do, as long as you think that the US Constitution is supposed to restrain government rather than give it leave to do what it wants. And that's to build postal roads between post offices and nothing more.
well,
It is not supposed to modernize airports. It is not supposed to be doing public highway systems. It is not supposed to be a tax collector to dole that money back out to do roads and other infrastructure, which now the Biden administration has, oh, well, humans are infrastructure too, kind of deal. So with that knowledge, if there comes up a bill that would spend billions of dollars on infrastructure other than on post offices and the roads that connect them, what would your vote be?
depends. And I would definitely vote for more, particularly if it involves air travel and stuff like that. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm a Republican, not a libertarian. I do
No,
believe that.
There is a difference.
Mhm.
This has nothing to do with being a Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian. This is following what's written in the Constitution. It tells the federal government there is only one piece of infrastructure that it is allowed to do. Otherwise, it is unconstitutional. And I don't like hearing that that's something that you don't like.
Listen, my objective is to make this country the strongest in the world, to protect us. And I'm sorry, but our businesses and everything that we do here is part of national security, so we don't get run over by the Chinese. If we don't have the strongest country possible, and that even involves regulating our airways and making sure that they work properly to facilitate business and infrastructure here, if it's not specifically in the Constitution about airways, I don't care. I don't want to be taken over by the Chinese.
So you're basically saying that, and I am going to follow up on this,
Sure.
because this is an extremely important point.
Okay.
So basically, the means justifies the ends regardless of what the US Constitution allows you to do as a congressman within the federal.
Then as a congressman, then I would probably help to try to change the Constitution to add things like air infrastructure in there. And add an amendment to the Constitution. And do it right.
I am really sorry to hear that answer. I really am.
I don't know who's going to take over the FAA and our airways if the United States government doesn't.
I asked you a question earlier about federalism.
Mm-hmm.
Should road or surface level transportation be returned to the domain of the states and have the federal government getting out of it?
Honestly, I'm fine with that.
Why not do air traffic control as a private entity as some other countries do? It is not allowed by the Constitution.
One of the biggest problems right now is we've got the Chinese coming in right now trying to buy our airports, our air traffic control, and take over everything right here. It is a national security issue. We saw 9/11 where 4 jets rammed into the Pentagon, tried to hit the White House, tried to hit, or did hit, the World Trade Centers. It's an absolute national security issue for us to control the airway, the air, the FAA, the planes, everything that's going on in our air. That is an absolute national security issue. There is no question about it.
Well, government didn't do such a good job at stopping those planes.
No, they absolutely didn't, but they learned from it. And I'm not going to allow the Chinese to come in and just buy a corporation and get in here and control our airspace. That will never happen under my watch as a congressman. I'm sorry. And if that's a big issue for you,
no.
national security is my biggest issue.
You're missing the point completely.
Maybe I am, but private entities are selling out to the Chinese every day here. Corporations do not care about our national security.
But the Commerce Department can make them care. The Commerce Department's not doing its job. The Commerce Department is essentially...
So you're talking about federal regulation of it then?
Well, is to regulate trade with other nations and between the several states, to the proper intent that the states should not be allowed to tax each other, as opposed to Wickard versus Filburn, which says anything that crosses state lines is federal government to regulate. Or could. Yes.
Which is the difference. But national security is a purview of the U.S. Constitution.
Well, then under the purview of the Constitution. I'm sorry.
All right, I'm going to pass.
Our airspace is national security.
Yeah, but you're kind of conflating stuff a bit. Anyway, don't...
No, I'm sorry, September 11th actually happened.
Yeah, and the TSA has been an outstanding success.
I'm not going to say any of those were outstanding successes. That's what I'm not saying. I mean, that's kind of conflating stuff. I mean...
No, anyway, listen. Something...
This is a real thing that's happening. You guys do realize the Chinese are in here trying to buy airports, that they're trying to buy airliners right now. You do understand this, right?
We understand that. What we're trying to probe is whether or not you believe that the U.S. Constitution is a fence or an open door.
Well, no, but you've actually just gone back right now and said that national security is under the Constitution. This is national security.
Having to do with the military, because that is an enumerated right.
But here's the thing: the State Department and the Commerce Department have a proper role to play, which they're not playing.
Chime in when you want.
Which they're not playing. Which is to actually allow or forbid such sales. And you're absolutely right. Having the Chinese or Bill Gates or anybody else buying up farmland, airports, or critical infrastructures, or even just buildings in sensitive places where they could then launch an attack. This is all bad, but it could be forbidden. That doesn't mean to say you have to have an FAA. It means to say you have to think carefully about what's doing harm or good in national security. I'd like to change tack on behalf of Steve. He says, we had an opportunity to make CD2 more competitive, but the governor had other ideas. Why do you think that happened?
Because he had a guy, his name was Jeff Cousins, and then when Jeff Cousins dropped out, he had a different guy named George Hansel. He had a ringer the entire time to run for CD2.
So he wanted to keep it a Democrat-leaning district because he was going to put a Democrat-leaning Republican in there. Is that your...
Well, no, it's a Democrat-leaning district. It's a D+2. The other one's essentially a 0. It's a 2-point difference. I mean, any Republican could win CD2 fairly easily. 2010, Kelly Ayotte won the district against the sitting congressman by 16, 18 points, I think.
Well, she won.
She ran for United States Senate, but she was running against the sitting CD2 congressman, Paul Hodes.
Yes, Hodes of hell.
Right, we just haven't run a candidate that was willing to take on Custer.
Right. Okay.
But he has guys that he was planning on running for this, and that's why he didn't want to shake the boat, because he had Jeff Cousins, and now he's got George Hansel.
So he didn't want to make it more Republican-leaning because it was...
No, one. We were talking about 2.
We're talking about 2, yes.
Yes.
Well, Hansel's in 2, right?
Right. So he wanted to keep it the same. They're almost essentially equal.
Okay.
It's only a 2-point difference.
There was an opportunity to make CD2 a better chance.
No, there was an opportunity to make CD1 a better chance.
Ah.
That's also my understanding.
Yeah, it was never 2. It
Okay,
was
so
1.
So Steve's misquoting this here.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I'll leave that. Why do you think you're the best candidate to beat Ann Custer?
Because I'm the only one willing to take her on. Not a single candidate in the last 10 years have talked about her pharmaceutical lobbying, her involvement with Rohypnol, all the corporate money that she gets. I mean, I'm sorry, the last group of candidates, I haven't seen one negative commercial against Ann Custer. Not to throw Steve under the bus here, but all he kept talking about is that she likes to make cookies. And then she trolled him by running an ad of her making cookies. I don't remember him attacking her once. And that goes with anybody else. I'm willing to attack her. I've got no problem. I'm loud, I'm angry, and I'm going to talk about her involvement with date rape drugs. And I'm not afraid to say it.
I will refrain from the other statement I would have made.
Thank you. Thank you.
Something about it would have taken more than.
Yeah, thank you. Rick?
So I was focusing on what kind of cookies did you make, but not important.
I have a third part from Steve, but
Well, yeah, save it for the next
save it
round.
for the next round. Go ahead, Rick.
So, a good segue to pharmaceutical. What is your view on right to try laws?
Oh, right. Trump put that in, which we have right to try now. But what did it accomplish, as far as I've seen? Almost nothing. I really don't care one way or the other. It does hurt clinical trials if people are out doing right to try. And the other thing, too, is I do believe gives a lot of people false hope. If people want to go and get snake oil, stuff that's not going to help them at all and have no idea what they're taking, I really don't care. They can do whatever they want. I don't think that we should prosecute anybody for any of that sort of stuff. People want to go, smoke weed because they think it's going to cure their cancer, which I've seen multiple times people talking about. Go ahead and do it.
Thanks.
All right, Skip. Wind him up.
You're going to be unlike the current federal delegation, who I generally call these are ambassadors from the U.S. federal government to the state of New Hampshire. We look at any Republican going there. Obviously, Charlie Bass didn't make the grade on this. As being representative of New Hampshire as well.
Sure.
That also means that there are two things that could be in play here. That Congress could pass a law, or try to pass a law, that would run counter to one or more of the articles in the New Hampshire Constitution. Would you, if you thought that the legislation was important enough, would you pass it anyways, or would you defer because you would say, nope, I cannot violate the New Hampshire Constitution?
I wouldn't pass anything that would violate the New Hampshire Constitution. My father was actually part of the last constitutional convention for New Hampshire, so he helped pass the last New Hampshire Constitution. So no, I would never go against my dad. That's not the reason that I'd go against it, but no, I wouldn't go. There's nothing in the New Hampshire Constitution that we need to go against, and that I'm aware of, unless there's something that you know of. No, I wouldn't.
Okay. Well, I know that New Hampshire Republicans have voted against or voted for New Hampshire bills that are blatantly against the New Hampshire Constitution. Article 28A, unfunded mandates, is a budget committee member's favorite tool to prevent spending. Yet Republicans helped Democrats pass the law that said schools will put into girls and boys' bathrooms feminine hygiene, and Governor Sununu signed it and never gave any money to implement it. Judy Aaron, New Hampshire State Rep, and Grokster put in a bill to repeal that on that very point, that it was unconstitutional, and it failed. So it can't happen. But I wanted to know about the New Hampshire Constitution.
You know what's ridiculous about this, and this is off subject since now we're on state law and stuff like that, but the feminine hygiene thing, the Democrats could have easily found private money, like within an hour, probably on a GoFundMe to pay for anything like that. There was never any need for a lot of this stuff, 99% of the time. And that's ridiculous. But again, when we're talking about state reps voting on something like that, that's state issues. No, I wouldn't put in a federal mandate to force the state to pay for feminine hygiene products and schools.
That was just an example.
Yeah, I know, just as an example. But
Mike?
personally, I want to get rid of the Department of Education. I don't think there has any place being there. That being said, if the Republicans get control, we're going to put stuff in the Department of Education that's going to make Democrats want to get rid of the Department of Education.
See, that's backwards. We should just get rid of it and stop the money go round.
The way you get rid of it, though, is by forcing them to teach actual history, because Democrats hate actual history.
But then you get into using the Department of Education as a cudgel, which is, we'd rather it wasn't there. So let's stick with thought number one, we'd rather it wasn't there.
Well, we get rid of it.
Because it's part of the whole money go round where they steal it from the individuals and use it to bribe the states to oppress the individuals. And that's why anything that causes the money to go to the DC and come back with strings attached should be shut down. There's a lot of that. Anyway, the question from Steve: once you get elected, there's a significant pressure to conform to the will of party leadership, because they say it's the only way you'll get anywhere. Committee assignments, re-election, whatever. What's your thoughts on going along to get along with the Republican leadership, either the state party or the national party?
I'm voting for Newt Gingrich for Speaker. The state party, I got no involvement with the state party. They hate me. They recruit people against me. I don't know what going along with them is. I've never gone along to get along. So my entire life has been not getting along with the state party leadership.
That's okay.
Rick?
What would your vote have been on what my understanding is that Congress just passed a law federalizing the legitimacy of same-sex marriages,
Right.
because they think it might be overturned by Clarence Thomas by himself or something.
Right. So I would not have voted for that. First off, I think I would have not voted at all on that one, and that's one of the few laws that I would never vote on, because it's a non-binding bill, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous and a waste of time. And I'm not going to vote one way or the other on non-binding bills, because it gives legitimacy to silliness. And that was a silly vote, is what it was at the end of the day. Totally effing meaningless, excuse my language.
Okay.
And then it's funny to me because a lot of people say only a guy like Charlie Bass can get elected in CD2. Charlie Bass voted for the DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. So if guys like George Hansel are running right now believe that he's the Charlie Bass candidate, I guess he would have voted against the same-sex marriage on this one, because the same way Charlie Bass voted? I'm not sure. But no, it's a totally non-binding law, and I'm not going to play a part in these silly politics, because we could do this all day. Like next week, the Democrats might have a bill saying like, we want to condemn white supremacy, and you need to vote for this bill. If you don't vote for it, then you're a white supremacist. No, I'm sorry. This silliness has no place in Congress.
No, fair enough. It doesn't. And yet it keeps turning up.
National debt, easy question.
Sure.
We run to the end of the fiscal year or near the fiscal year. There's not enough money. People are screaming their heads off, as they have over the last 20 years, because they can't get regular order bills done. Would you vote for an omnibus bill simply to keep the government working at the federal level?
No, absolutely not. And I hate all these omnibus bills. And I hate people sticking stuff into bills that have nothing to do with the bill starts with. I want to do everything to prevent stuff like that. And again, when we talk about Congress silliness, that's the stuff I want to end and not be a part of. And quite frankly, there's even going to be stuff that I may not vote for or even vote against because people add silliness into it. And that stuff drives me insane. When something has nothing to do with the legislation that you're trying to pass. And I hate the threats of, well, the government's going to shut down and you're hurting the vets or you're hurting the people on Medicaid. I hate those arguments because that's, it's manipulative towards congressmen when they do stuff like that.
Mike?
You said you want to get rid of all these agencies.
I think I've only named one, but I can name a bunch more.
You've named one, yes. Are there in fact others that you think we should get rid of simply because Congress ought to make the laws, not buildings full of bureaucrats?
Well, it's not even just about making the laws, but I mean, it's like the IRS, right? We don't need it. I've been pushed by multiple sides on the fair tax and flat tax. We don't need the IRS, whichever way that we go up. There are better solutions. And the IRS, as we saw under Obama, was weaponized. We know that there's huge issues with the Department of Energy. Obviously, we want to get rid of Department of Education. What does the Department of Education do for local schooling? I want schools to be on the local level. I want to get rid of it, but I want to figure out ways to get rid of it. There are some departments that I would keep, but what I'd like to do is drain the swamp. I want to decentralize DC and move those departments to other areas. Do I want to completely get rid of the FDA? No. But do I think that there's a huge amount of waste in the FDA? Absolutely. Do I think that many people in the FDA are absolutely anti-American and trying to send our drugs overseas by over-regulating here? Do I think that there's a lot of people in the FDA that are absolutely in the pocket of some of the largest pharmaceutical companies out there, like Eli Lilly and Pfizer? 100%.
Yeah, go ahead and keep.
No, that was the end of my little bit of a tirade there, so I'll let you do your cameras and.
Well, it's Rick's turn.
Do you need to, it's been about an hour, do you need to do your,
No, I'm good.
okay.
Actually, why don't you hold it for a sec? Now that you brought it up. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on the shameful, embarrassing, I'm not sure of the right adjectives, to how our FBI and Department of Justice have been acting?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, I think we need full investigations into them. I've been saying this ever since Waco, Texas and Ruby Ridge. When I was, I think, 13, 14 years old. And I saw the overreach of the federal government and what they did, massacring children, setting fire to a bus full of children, killing a person's entire family because they didn't agree with them on some weapons charges. I have always been concerned about these federal agencies, and I think that they've run amok. I mean, we saw the Atlanta bombing, what happened there. I mean, it's just absolutely unfathomable, some of the things that these people have gotten away with. The way that these federal agents have terrified me my entire life.
So who could investigate them then? If
Well,
it
I mean,
was up to the top,
it's
so to speak.
Congress, the President, Department of Justice. Unfortunately, I think we could have done more under the Trump administration. We really do need an administration head. We need a president there that's going to be there. I mean, as a freshman congressman, I don't think I'm going to be able to take on the FBI myself. But we know that they are corrupt agencies. They're absolutely corrupt, and they're full of corrupt, liberal-leaning, anti-American, leftists. I'm not going to call them anarchists, but they're not good people, and we've seen this for the last 20, 30 years.
West Virginia versus the EPA.
Mm-hmm.
Do you now have the ability to weaponize that and as a congressman bring suit against some of these departments that are not part of the enumerated parts of the Constitution? And just for those that are listening, just to make sure, the EPA decided to take a power upon itself that hadn't been delegated to it by Congress to regulate CO2 emissions from power plants.
Right.
They ruled that when you overstep, you get slapped down, and that's going to reverberate. Does that guide the kinds of bills that you would either help to write or to vote for or against?
I think it's more about investigating the EPA. I think the EPA is overreached in a lot of different areas. You know, the EPA has been very problematic within the United States, and I think that they believe the idea of more legislation and more rules makes for a better environment, which is not true. I think, quite frankly, the EPA, just like I went on a little tirade about the FDA, I think that they've been the same. They've been very anti-American. I think that they've tried to drive industry out of the United States, which I think is ridiculous, because when they're like, oh, well, it's fine if you move the polluters to another country, it's still the same air, still the same water. I realize that's not answering exactly the question that you were saying right now, but I think that's one of the biggest underlying problems in the way to hit the FDA. To try to remove the EPA entirely as a congressman is never going to happen, especially by myself. Doesn't matter whether you think it's constitutionally legal or not, and I realize what you're saying right now, and I agree with you. But at the same time, yes, environmental regulation should be more on a state level, but it's probably not going to happen. As a congressman, I would go onto larger investigations into the EPA and what exactly they're doing. And I do know and see where a lot of the problems are.
Okay. Right.
Okay, well, we sort of already asked a question about agencies. I mean, effectively, Congress has delegated its lawmaking ability to these agencies, and
I know, and it
seems
wrong
loath to get it back. You know, it's a rot that we've had since the beginning of last century, and accelerated significantly in the 60s. About 20 years before I came here, but that's about right.
20 years before I was born. Sorry, Mike.
You opened yourself up for that one.
That's okay. Thank you.
Shall we come back?
And you said there's better ways of paying for things than the IRS. What would you do? Would you tithe the states, like the Articles of Confederation tried to do, but not very well, or something else? You say you say we have to pay for the federal government. How would you do it?
Well, like flat tax or fair tax. Fair tax, I kind of like it. People in New Hampshire hate the idea because you say, you know, it's a national sales tax. You know, and of course we're in New Hampshire. We don't have a sales tax. But you wouldn't see the sales tax if you know how the fair tax works. The thing I like about the fair tax is that, you know, I'm going to use the fair tax thing, and for full disclosure, I used to work for Mike Huckabee. So he used to always do the fair tax thing, you know, the hookers and drug dealers and stuff like that. They would end up paying taxes on the things that they buy, you know, whether you buy a car or whatnot, like that. I hate increasing the amount of tax mechanisms that we have. You know, obviously to the federal government, we only pay the federal income tax. Well, no, then we also have a gas tax. No, exactly right. No, well, it's not just federal. That's just the majority of it. But it's like, I like one taxable mechanism. And that also takes away a lot of the fraud. And it also takes away a lot of the corporations. Like, I know when we used to talk about the fair tax, we would talk about corporations that would spend $5 million to evade $6 million in taxes. Like, that's ridiculous. We need a better tax code and a way of collecting. Now, I don't want to get into the fight of which is the way the best one. I guess, as a congressman, maybe I have to get in the fight, though. I guess I would go with the fair tax as the national, straight up, and then get rid. But you need to make a constitutional amendment. You have to get rid of all the other taxes. You can't have all these other mechanisms for tax. You have to have one mechanism, a national sales tax, and that's it.
Yeah, tell that to the Europeans who thought the value-added tax was going to replace their income taxes.
Because that's why you have to do a constitutional amendment to actually have it done that way.
And
I know that that's a pie in the sky thought that it might happen. But you know when Obama got in, he actually said that he liked the fair tax and was thinking about pushing it, but then it was his own party who pushed against it. Remember also Obama liked merit pay in schools. Remember when he talked about that documentary Looking for Superman or Waiting for Superman, and then talked about the woman who was running the Washington D.C. school system, and he said, "Oh, this merit pay is a good idea," and like he had no idea what he was saying, that the unions were going to come down on like a ton of bricks. But every once in a while you hear a Democrat say, "Oh, that's a really great idea," until the unions or the whoever special interest gets up to them and says, you're not supposed to be saying that, right?
Yeah, well, they said Obama only sounded natural when he was preaching to the unions because he didn't have to be reminded by the teleprompter what to say.
Except the teachers union when he said he liked merit pay.
Sorry, haven't heard that one before.
But hey, I like merit pay too. You can put me down on that one too.
Going back to federal agencies that seem to be not only not.
Yeah, we're going to get rid of the ATF.
Is it that obvious?
Well, I think most of it was just done by Thomas Sowell. No,
Yeah.
not Thomas Sowell. Clarence Thomas.
So yeah.
I was going to say, also a brilliant guy, but in a different place.
No more tax stamps. I mean, come on. What do I got to pay like that money to get my suppressor?
Or the money you
It
pay
was
for
the
booze
time.
or for cigarettes.
Because clearly if I put a suppressor on the end of my 338, it's completely quiet.
It is in the movies. It is in the movies.
If I shoot my
Even
338 in
again,
this room,
to show
even with a
my-
suppressor, it might break some
To
windows.
show my lower sophistication, even in Get Smart, Maxwell Smart put a silencer on his revolver and
Yeah.
made it almost silent.
But he also had what was that, the Kona
The
sound?
Kona
Kona
silence,
silence.
separate technology.
So,
He got my question. Guy with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives, and Really Big Fires.
Yeah, I read his mind. I do
You know,
that
if you saw
sometimes.
that case of the ATF guys and the Delaware State Trooper going to this guy's house,
Mhm.
I just want to see them. There's an uptick in gun violence, That was scary. Glad he had his Ring doorbell thing going.
I just had a question. I actually had 3 questions in my mind, and now all of a sudden I can't remember all 3.
That's the ADD, I'm with you.
Yeah. So let me make up the
Squirrel. No.
Squirrel. Oh, here's one.
Mm.
There was a report out, and I haven't blogged about this yet, but it seems like the Biden administration is going to. Let me back up. We often hear a lot lately because of the decisions by the Supreme Court of religious freedom.
Sure.
One was the football coach, the middle of the field praying.
Kennedy thing, right?
Yes, praying silently by himself, and then also the voucher laws in Maine just got knocked down because Supreme Court said it doesn't matter what kind of school that a parent is sending their child to, whether it's a private school, a secular school, or a parochial school. The Biden administration is, from this one report, is now going to be spending millions of dollars to send out what I would call evangelists for secular humanism. And we know that they have ordered their consuls as embassies to fly transgender or LGBT flags in front. Went all over the blogosphere.
No.
Is that a issue with the First Amendment where it's trying to establish a religion? In your mind?
I hadn't thought about it from that direction. I personally find it offensive for anybody to fly any non-American sanctioned flag. And I mean, we have a lot of American sanctioned flags. I mean, whether it's the POW flag, the Gadsden flag. So flying the LGBT is pushing a religion or anti-religion, which is a religion in and of itself, I suppose.
You could think of religions as being religious.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they are also philosophies
Yeah.
at the same time.
Personally,
I
I would.
look at a lot of what's going on with the LGBT stuff
Yeah.
with almost a religious fervor. Same thing with sustainability and greenness. Oh, there's another.
I don't
area.
believe that. I honestly don't believe that our embassy should fly any flags that aren't American flags.
Okay.
I mean, whether it be a Betsy Ross flag, an American flag, a state flag, a Gadsden flag, a Marine Corps flag, I don't care. I mean, these are all flags of the United States. These are all sanctioned flags by our government. I don't think that any non-government sanctioned flag should be up there, and I don't think any flag promoting a sexuality, a religion, cutting off your penis, I don't know, what place does that have in being on any of this stuff? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and quite frankly, I mean, Manchester, New Hampshire's done it before. I mean, I've seen them fly a fucking Cuban flag. Excuse my language again. I mean, that's a flag totally. You might as well fly a Confederate flag. I mean, the Cuban flag was based in racism. I mean, it was designed by a guy who believed in slavery, who wanted to enslave people. I mean, it has nothing to do with the United States. I don't want these other country flags up there too. And I mean, no offense, no Union Jacks either. But for some reason, Hawaii can still keep that Union Jack on the Hawaiian flag. We'll fly the Hawaiian flag, but I do think Hawaii should take that Union Jack off.
And here we have the cross of St. George because it might offend people of a certain persuasion.
Okay, you're up.
Oh, it's a total thing. I meant to make a comment on Yahoo News Story,
But we can fly. Oh, sorry.
and I just put whatever they said. I just put BS, just those two letters, and I got a warning. This might offend some people. Do you still want to post it? Yes.
On the anniversary.
It's two letters.
On the anniversary D-Day, my father does fly a Canadian flag and a Union Jack, but he doesn't even use the red ensign. He uses the new Canadian flag, which I actually always find weird. Why don't we use the red ensign anymore? That's the old Canadian flag that we had during the Second World War.
I don't
Anyway, sorry to derail that. It just made me.
Now it's just this maple leaf thing, which is a great flag to fly during hockey games.
How would you set about building coalitions to make some of the changes that you have in mind? You talk about things that can't be done without a constitutional amendment, and that's true. But what about building coalitions in Congress to try and get some change out?
Well, some of the things that I do want to change is decentralizing DC. And I think that it's very easy to move departments out when you can work with Democrats from Democrat states and you say those departments are going to move to your state. Like a Department of Transportation or USDA, let's say. Like USDA, we could move that to Indiana. The problem with, everybody talks about, we need term limits. Term limits clearly aren't passing. I would vote for term limits all day long. I don't care. I don't want to be there for a long time, honestly. But unfortunately, what we see is a lot of Republicans and Democrats talk about term limits, then they get in, then they forget about it. Charlie Bass said that he would be in for 5 terms. Then he ran for a 6th. So that doesn't seem to work as well. I think what would work better is actually decentralizing DC. It's surprising to me that it didn't happen after September 11th. We saw the attacks on DC and we realized how vulnerable we were. Why do we have, the Department of Transportation, the Pentagon, Capitol Hill, the White House, all in one small area? It's completely unnecessary. But let's start talking about departments, like, again, Department of Transportation or the USDA. Those could be moved out to the Midwest somewhere. But then you work with Democrats, and when you work with Democrats, you have 2 Democrat senators from possibly, I don't know, like Illinois, that start talking to their other Democrat senators and say, hey, we want the USDA, we want the Department of Transportation. Now, I believe that the average income at the Department of Transportation is something about $185,000 a year. It's around that.
Yikes.
Might be higher, might be lower. Skip's nodding with me, so he believes that I'm correct in that number. That's crazy. We would be able to pay people to work in the same department in the Midwest for about half that price. We are wasting so much money. And then who are they being influenced by? Are they being influenced by regular Americans like you and me? No. They're being taken out by lobbyists all the time. They're being influenced by lobbyists. That's a great way to start getting rid of lobbyists and draining the swamp. And anyway, that's how I work with a coalition, is by you get this department in your state, you get this department in your state. It's like Oprah. You get one, you handing them out.
Go ahead, because I just lost my question and you got yours.
Okay. Term limits. There aren't any for congressmen.
Right.
There aren't any for U.S. senators. Only the president. But
And not
there's
even
a
that
more-
long.
There is a more insidious area, however, that I think that term limits might be really, really good. And that's in the administrative state.
Sure.
Congressmen and senators come and go. Sometimes it takes a long time, but eventually they go one way or the other. Either they walk out or they're hauled out.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying for a laugh line. But
it's true.
But what about term limits on staffers?
Yeah, I mean, here's
And
the thing.
preventing them from, okay, my X amount of time in this office is done, I'll just move on to another one. A complete, that's it.
Here's the problem with that, and I'd be fine with it to one degree, but like, there's so many people that spend their time in DC in these departments, and to tell you the truth, here's the problem.
No, I'm talking about Congress and
Right.
Senate staffers.
Right.
That's it. Not,
In
not
departments,
not
Congress, Center
departments.
staffers, that's fine. There's so many people who spend their time there. I'm gonna tell you what, these are like the worst people who stay there. Because the people who are really good leave and become lobbyists or work for lobbyists and make tons of money. So we can term them out, which is fine, but they're only gonna go become lobbyists then, which means they're still there influencing everybody. Now, some people are truly altruistic. They believe it's their calling to help the government. But a lot of them are the people who just can't get a good job as a lobbyist. And we keep some of the worst people in there. But you know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't know the best way to affect that. Because it's the same thing, like, even when we talk about term limits for congressmen and women, I wonder why a lot of Republicans, quite frankly, and I'm going to throw Republicans under the bus, a lot of Republicans leave to go make lots of money. A lot of Democrats stay there for what reason, I'm not even sure.
Make lots of money.
They would make...
That's
okay. Okay, and Jean Shaheen, that's a good example. Her whole family is
Doesn't mean
making
her
money off of her
husband is
being a
making
United
the
States
money.
Senator. Okay, and I'd love to throw Custer under the bus for this, but does her family make millions of dollars from her being a congresswoman? I haven't seen
do not
anything.
know.
Yeah, they don't seem to. Shaheen's family, absolutely. No question about it. Carol Shea Porter? No, it doesn't seem to be that way. The Sununus? Yes. His brother, one-term senator, is making tons of money. Kelly Ayotte, one term, she's making tons of money. Gordon Humphrey, I think he's on an island somewhere. You know, so I'm not against having them turned out because they're there and they garner so much power and stuff like that. And maybe that's what it's about. And for some of them, they're garnering the power sometimes to their wives, their girlfriends, their best friends who are making money and they get kicked back in some way. And that is problematic, absolutely. But then at the same time, we cycle through these people and then they still just become lobbyists. The best way, I think, to drain the swamp is to decentralize DC, like I said before. So I'm not against it, and I'd be fine with looking into it, but I think the best way is to spread government across this country. instead of having it in one place. I know, there's such a long answer for what should be a simple question.
Mike.
I had long days, sorry.
If you put it me closer, I would have tapped it.
All right. I try not to play whoopsie. Anyway, yeah, so building coalitions, trying to get government to do what you want it to do, or more to the point, to do less. That's a hard game. What would you do in terms of voting for party leadership or speaker?
Newt Gingrich.
You would bring him back from
100%. I think he was the best speaker we've had in my entire lifetime. And honestly, he's lost a bunch of weight. I see him, he's been going back and forth to Italy with Callista. You know what? I like Jim Jordan. You know, people actually in there and stuff like that. I definitely want to vote for somebody besides McCarthy. The only thing that I'm worried about is what's going to happen in the end. It's like what happened to all the Democrats who said that they were going to vote against Pelosi, right? What happened? Nobody ran against Pelosi. And then all they had was Pelosi to run against, okay? So I don't know if someone's going to step up to the plate. I'm not going to say that I'm going to sit there and vote for myself if nobody else goes in there. I'm not that narcissistic. I actually, honestly, wouldn't hate bringing back Newt Gingrich. I think it would be hilarious. I mean, the guy still seems to be on top of his game. He's a very smart guy, man. And contract with America, everything else. I mean, he was one of our most successful speakers we've seen in my entire lifetime. But at the same time, I don't want McCarthy, but I also don't want to be the guy who says, I'm not going to vote for McCarthy, and then everybody says they're voting for McCarthy, and I'm the one person out of 200 that says I'm going to vote for myself.
Okay.
Can you not abstain in that vote?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but the problem is when we talk about legislative agendas that we want to get done, if I'm going to be the one guy that doesn't, and by the way, I would be the one guy, there's going to be 20, 30 congressmen that go in there that say that I will absolutely not vote for McCarthy the same way the Democrats did, and then they're going to vote for, like they voted for Pelosi. AOC, Omar Ilmar, they all said the same thing. They would not vote for her. 100%, 100%. And what did they all do? They voted for her. Because at the end of the day, deals were made. Nobody ran against Pelosi. So, but then again, don't be mad at me. Be mad at the Jim Jordans of the world if they don't decide to step up. If somebody steps up, then I'll probably be voting for that person.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I lost my question again. I shouldn't have said anything. I'm bringing a notepad next time.
Also, by the way, when you talk about abstaining, I'm not going to Congress to abstain from anything, with the exception if it's a completely non-binding, meaningless bill. If it's a real legislative piece, I'm going to vote yes or no.
Now I remembered a couple more that I wanted to ask.
Remember
There
mine
are-
too while you're at it.
I can remember. I'm not a telepathic. There are a bunch of special interest groups within Congress.
Yes.
Which caucuses would you join? Which ones would you definitely not join?
Oh, geez, I don't know which ones I wouldn't definitely not join. I mean, I suppose the Black Caucus, but to join the Freedom Caucus, I guess would be the one that I would join. Usually people ask me what committees I want to be on.
That's why I said we ask different questions.
And try to join the Hispanic Caucus. I don't know if they'd have me.
Do you
Just because I
identify
think
as
it would be
Hispanic?
funny. Well, my grandmother did come here from Mexico. I joined the Freedom Caucus. I guess I'm not aware of that many other of the caucuses.
Okay. Back to you.
I don't have a whole lot more, I don't think. Well, all right, you're talking about adding amendments. Are there any that you'd strike down or try to repeal?
Oh. That's a good point. Maybe some that I would change the wording a little bit, maybe, but No, I can't think of any off the top of my head that I would strike down or repeal, no. We got rid of the alcohol one, right?
Oh, yeah. Do you think that the direct election of senators is a good idea?
What's that?
Do you think that the direct election of senators is a good idea?
I wouldn't repeal it. I mean, you say, do I think it's a good idea? It's what's there right now. I've been asked about that before, whether we should go back to the system where the legislatures elect the senators. Maybe I could be convinced to go the other way, but it definitely isn't, anything that is my. It's not my any sort of supreme objective of mine.
Okay.
To change that.
I have a fairly good idea of your thoughts on this, but I will ask it anyway. What are your thoughts on the bipartisan gun legislation that just passed with the funding for red flag laws? And sub-question, what are your thoughts on red flag laws or emergency risk protection orders?
So I think the biggest problem with red flag laws is the ambiguity of it. It's meaningless. It's just a name, red flag laws. It doesn't mean anything. We have other laws that the federal government regulates like that, where we decide somebody's a sex offender. You're a sex offender in one state for urinating in public, or in another state it could be something serious. So I have an issue with funding for non-specific agendas that don't mean anything. And then when we talk about red flag laws, we don't prosecute people for breaking the laws that are on the books. People on social media all the time make criminal threats. We hear about this, somebody shoots up a school, and they were talking about on social media about shooting up a school. That's a felony. That's a direct threat. And then somebody associates that and says, well, red flag law would have prevented it. No, it was already a felony. We need to prosecute the laws that are on the books to begin with. When we talk about laws, we need specific laws, not just catchy names, like red flag. So if someone's going to say, what do you think about red flag laws? Well, then I'm against them. To ask me what the actual law is.
Well, then let's step back. My understanding is they were called red flag laws after the Florida shooter, whose name I won't mention. But the idea of someone believes you are a danger to yourself or others, they make a complaint to police department, judge, sheriff, whatever it is in the different states, and your guns are taken away for ostensibly
so then the question
year,
is so then they think that you're in danger, but usually maybe 50% of the time, some 50% not, you actually committed a crime. Did you actually make a direct threat? If you say, I'm going to kill people, I'm going to go to the school and shoot it up, that's a felony. That's not a red flag law. You don't need a new law for that. You just need to go after somebody for actually making what's called criminal threatening.
Well, you weren't going where I wanted you to go.
Sure.
Fair enough. It's that you don't get to face your accuser.
Oh, no, you
Any of
absolutely have to
these
face
emergency orders, whatever you wish to call them.
Oh, no, you can't do that. I mean,
But that's what the
you
one
have
that's been
due
proposed
process.
in New Hampshire for the last 2 rounds, to have that, in which, of course, people said...
Hold on. In New Hampshire, they can take your guns away for what?
It was proposed. It didn't make it to law. But the idea that was fine, and if you lost your guns for a year, hopefully you could get them back, maybe? Like, no one seemed to be too fine on the details on that. My general issue with laws that are like the movie Minority Report, I admit I never saw it, but the idea that they know you will commit a crime is, so the biggest issue with those is they take your guns away, but you still have
Right, it's
like a
crime.
chainsaw, gasoline, and a motor vehicle. You could still kill yourself. You could still run into a Christmas parade and kill 8 people. So, but somehow taking your guns away has solved the problem, and
No, right.
you don't have due
absolutely
process.
should
That's
be.
where I was leading with that.
Right, no, and number one, that should be would have never passed it for that reason alone, because it's so ambiguous, it doesn't mean anything. Number 2 was, I take personal offense to the boyfriend loophole. Why is it called boyfriend loophole?
Because men are evil. Don't you read the paper?
But I mean, don't you find that interesting that actually they passed legislation that was intentionally sexist as hell?
Well, I still have issues with the domestic violence. Was it the Lautenberg Amendment out of New Jersey? That misdemeanors are now, you lose your gun rights, but and it's ex post facto.
So
no one seemed to care about that.
I didn't even realize, I thought that misdemeanor domestic, you did lose your gun rights.
Yes, because of the Lautenberg Amendment. And it was retroactive. It was ex post facto. So they passed the law in whatever year it was. Let's just call it last Tuesday.
Yeah.
But you had an argument with your girlfriend 2 years ago, and you just pleaded it out to a $50 fine to make it go away. You lose your gun rights, as opposed to after the law went into effect.
So what's interesting is after Craig Benson wasn't governor anymore, his daughter was 18. She was arrested for domestic for twisting her boyfriend's finger. And so I thought that you lost your ability to own a gun after a domestic like that. But again, she's not the boyfriend, she's the girlfriend.
That shouldn't matter from the Lautenberg Amendment perspective, domestic violence. If she was convicted.
She was convicted, she pled guilty.
She should have lost her gun rights.
So I would assume that she lost her gun rights. But it seemed ridiculous to me.
Well,
18-year-old girl twists her boyfriend's finger.
They're snappy names. Well, most of Illinois had a.
What does that have to do with the boyfriend? The boyfriend was assaulted.
Because men are evil and everybody knows that, and women.
Okay, so listen. When, honestly, tell you the truth. Anybody who puts in anything that's like girlfriend amendment, boyfriend amendment, men are evil amendment, it will never get voted on by me. It's the pro. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. The other thing, I compared this to a reporter the other day, and he said, "Well, what do you think about red flag?" And I said, "Well, okay, here's what I said now. What is an adequate education? What is a red flag?" And he couldn't answer it back. I said, "Well, this is the problem." But and I got myself into trouble with this. You remember? When I was talking about it at the time, I was saying, people on social media who make criminal threats, they should be treated like they make criminal threats. You get on social media, you say you're going to shoot up a school, that is a felony. There you go. Simple as that. You make an implicit threat, that is a crime. We go after the laws that are on our books. But I saw this multiple times. I had a guy texting me telling me about how he wants to shoot the president. I gave it to the Secret Service. I don't even think they cared. Because there were so many people saying that they were going to shoot Donald Trump. Now, if we were to take away the gun rights of a person who says that they're going to shoot the president, is that a red flag law? No, that's criminal threatening. You should absolutely have your guns taken away if you say you're going to shoot the president. That's criminal threatening.
You're just joking. That's what one of these latest...
I was just making a rap video.
That's one of these local mass shooters. That's what he said.
Okay, but you know what?
He was just joking. And
now we do get into a weird freedom of speech if we talk about it being a rap video. Was it art?
No, it's rap. I'm here all week.
Thank you. No, but I mean, that does actually bring it into a complicated question. I don't have the answer for that one. So if someone's rapping about shooting the president, is it criminal threatening or is it art? I honestly don't have the answer. I'm actually presenting that just out there.
I'll just say it's not art.
Yeah.
Well, because it's rap. That's a circular definition right there.
What we are seeing all over the country, especially in education, but not limited to it thereof, is the special, and I say that very sarcastically, the special use of terminology, oftentimes called preferred pronouns, but not limited to them. We see an effort that would categorize hate speech as being illegal. So if I use that stupid new word, but the left is always coming up with new ones. If I misgender somebody, and we call it he, a she, or a she, a he, they would want to make it illegal for me to do so, or they treat me like it is. And in some schools, they are treating it like that. Same thing with what's called dead naming, which is if somebody has transitioned to another sex, which I am a biologist. I know what a female is. I know what a woman is, and that you can't do that. But yet, if you don't go along with it, you can get punished for that, especially in school systems. But it's having this come out of the universities and colleges. We're seeing it applied almost with a de facto level of it's illegal to do so. They're trying to make it an actual crime at this point. My question is, how far are you willing to go to save or protect free speech, regardless how offensive it is to somebody else?
I mean, I think this is something that is going to take most place in the courts. You know, I mean, how do we pass legislation to say that we have freedom of speech when it's a legitimate constitutional amendment?
Well, they are already changing the laws so that to make them
right
I hate this word,
but are these,
non-binary or inclusive.
Are these federal laws or state laws?
Both.
There are federal laws?
Yes, there are.
About misgendering somebody?
Well, no, not that one
Okay.
Yet.
Like what?
So my question is...
I mean, one of the biggest areas, I suppose, where you see Congress is going to be more involved with, like, I guess the military. Like if we're misgendering people within the military.
Well, here's
Yeah,
a great
man.
example, since you brought up the military.
Yeah.
A number of Christian chaplains have been brought up on charges, almost thrown out of the military,
Seriously?
because they refused to bow down to the LGBT lobby for simply saying what it says in Genesis, God made him and her, and not 57 flavors of pines.
Seems like a violation of separation of church and state. I mean, the military offers chaplains of all different religions. I mean, obviously the most popular ones.
But
So then, so for the government to come in and force them to change religious doctrine, that doesn't seem legal.
but they're getting away with it
Well,
for the sake of what?
I would put
And we're seeing that.
whatever Congress could do to put a stop to that, I mean, I would. I'm just trying to think about what Congress could do, or what would be effective, because it doesn't seem like any of this would go through the courts as being legal. I mean, what did we see recently? Somebody just got some huge settlement from. Oh yeah, because she was like pro-life at a company. They ended up paying out like $15 million to her. And then obviously we saw the coach, the praying thing. I mean, it seems like the courts are, granted being slow to come, are taking care of things, and probably the best way to do it. I'm fine with passing legislation or voting on legislation to help protect a lot of this stuff. But it's like you're passing legislation against their legislation, like my dark magic against your dark magic. At the end of the day, the courts are going to decide most of this stuff that you're talking about, which I think the courts have been doing a fairly good job of lately. I don't know where all these good judges came from.
Gosh, I just don't understand what you mean.
But I think that how these things have to play out in the end, for it to work the best. You know, like what you're saying, like particularly when you go to the military, or there's freedom of speech, like you misgendered somebody. I don't even know what that is. And I realize that the schools are doing stuff. You're going to want to go after the schools, but what do? You go after the schools using the Department of Education, right?
Which Biden is now weaponizing.
Right, which
to
I'm fine.
force this LGBT transgenderism upon
Which again,
schools.
when I brought up earlier, I said I'm not opposed to weaponizing the Department of Education for Republicans and conservatives, only with the pure objective to get rid of it.
Okay.
And allow states to have their own, to decide what they're going to do. And quite frankly, if California wants to do whatever they're going to do in their schools, and New Hampshire's going to do whatever. People are going to leave those school systems. The other thing what's happening is, and Biden has said this very explicitly, you know, we are going to become a majority Hispanic nation at a point. And the Hispanics are not down with mislabeling genders and everything else that they're talking about. We saw what happened from, First Lady Latino Taco there, whatever her name is.
Dr. Jill Biden.
Yeah, whatever, Latino Taco. I mean, they are losing Latina voters in droves because of this social agenda crap that they're pushing. Because it doesn't meld with Latin culture. That's tacos aside, whatever. That's just the truth of the matter. The libs are on the losing side of this. Whether it comes to this transgender sports stuff, 90% of people out there don't believe that, men should be swimming in women's sports. As a congressman, am I going to make this a primary objective? No. Do I think it's something that's going to work? Do I agree with it? No. Do I think it's something that's going to work itself out? Absolutely. And the liberals are on the losing side because normal, rational people don't agree with this stuff.
Mike?
All right.
I was just about to say, I think we lost Mike.
I got one if you need
No,
it.
I actually did have a question.
Best football team, Manchester United.
The Hammers. I mean, this is what football team.
That was the brother-in-law Custer here a few years ago. No, the bigger question is, what laws should Congress make? Should there be a national hate crime law or even a federal firearms act?
No, but get all of that stuff gone.
Oh,
No
yeah,
hate
yeah.
crime laws, federal firearms acts, the what was it, the 86 bill that doesn't allow me to purchase new machine guns, the tax stamps.
In other words, should Congress try to police the states, or should it just stay the hell away?
There's some things that we need to do for national security and for commerce, but for a lot of this stuff, well, you say police the states. I mean, first off, the Second Amendment, I think, is fairly clear. I think most of these state laws are illegal when it comes to firearms. So to police the states, yeah, I mean, if the states aren't following the First Amendment, allowing me to misgender somebody, the Second Amendment, allow me to shoot my darn gun that doesn't wake up my neighbors, that's only kind of loud, then yeah, I mean, if they're trying to overreach, sure. But as a congressman, I mean, you don't have much policing power yourself, or any whatsoever,
No,
with the
sure,
exception of an
all right.
investigation. I can pull somebody in there in front and ask them a bunch of stupid questions.
I guess
I can do that.
put better, should Congress make laws which are superfluous in terms of what the states already have? The states have laws against murder. Should the feds have laws against murder? For example, most states have penalties for most kinds of wrongdoing. Why should the federal government, or should the federal government indeed, have a law that overrides or applies to all, say a sentencing law, for example?
No, and we do, in two areas, have certain laws with both domestic and sex offense, which are unevenly applied, which is problematic. It has gone before the United States Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled them constitutional. That's a previous Supreme Court, but I actually had issues with both of those rulings. So I don't believe that a guy who urinates in public should be sent to the same essential penalty of being a registered sex offender and put on the same level as somebody who rapes a 40-year-old. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think the same thing as somebody who, beats the crap out of their wife for 20 years versus a 18-year-old girl who twists her boyfriend's finger shouldn't be held to the same sort of set of rules by a federal government under domestic assault. And both of those should have been ruled unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court, but they weren't.
I want to borrow something from Mike's question for a moment. Just what I had before, what I had forgotten twice. Is there such thing as a hate crime or hate speech? And if so, should it be criminalized?
The United States Supreme Court already said there is something called hate speech, and it's 100% protected by the First Amendment.
So should it be
And I agree.
criminalized?
What's that?
So it should not be criminalized.
I support the First Amendment and the United States Supreme Court's ruling on
Okay,
this.
how about a hate crime? What did I just read? Got charged with federal hate crime.
Aren't all crimes hate crimes? No, I'm just kidding. And they are.
That is literally my
Yeah,
point.
No, I don't think that there
Because
should be.
if-
I honestly don't believe that there should be. It's stupid.
If
It's
there
silly.
is hot,
Whole
if
thing's
there is
silly.
cold, you can't have one without the other.
Right.
You can't have a hate crime without a
This one's hate,
love
this
crime.
one's not hate. It's stupid.
But
You kill someone, you killed someone. Same
pretty
penalty.
much, don't care why. So my question, the other question was, would you authorize, and if it happened, be on the committee, a congressional investigation of the Biden crime family?
Would I be on the committee?
If that were offered to you
Oh,
to investigate all
Sure.
the little shenanigans that are,
sure.
Our
But my
Biden
absolute push is going to
family.
be on AI. And if I get AI, then I'm not going to push anybody out of the way because that's all I want.
fair enough.
I mean, if someone's just like, hey, you should be on this committee, like you freshman congressman,
No, I mean a standard
that we're going to
committee.
make you super famous because we think of, you've got great good looks and your wonderful ability to speak. Yeah, sure.
I
I'd jump
was
on
more
it.
on not a standing committee, but a special
Yeah,
congressional
this would be a special
hearing
committee,
on
yes,
that, yes.
absolutely.
Okay,
No, I'd go on the J6 one too if they asked me, if it's still around.
looks like it will be.
Okay, from domestic to foreign policy. Not that we have asked an awful lot of anybody at this point, but Ukraine. Congress just passed yet another hike of sending money and or material to Ukraine in this, what's turning out to be a proxy war with no war power decree.
Mm-hmm.
And in the short amount of time it's been going on, have already spent well over $100 billion. At what point does limited play into this?
I wouldn't vote for most of the money that's going over there, so I wouldn't vote for any of these bills. They need to separate some of the stuff. I don't mind sending the food aid. Other than that, the United States defense companies want to send the old weapons over there so that we can make new ones. I get that. I don't support that necessarily. Some of it, maybe I'd be okay with, but there's also a lot of funds that are going over there that aren't being monitored. And I would definitely vote against all of those. These omnibus bills of just spending, I would have voted against every single one of them because I didn't agree with any of them. And we're not really tracking the funds.
Okay, Mike?
Not really sure we go after that one. I mean, foreign adventures are always dangerous territory anyway. Nah, sorry, nothing.
Okay. Rick?
I'm empty at the moment. Sorry, back
Well,
to you, Skip.
I guess it's gonna come back to
You
me.
said you always have questions.
I do. All right, on this one. At the beginning of this country, the Constitution was created in such a way to have the separation of powers between the three co-equal branches. The idea was to jealously guard each powers or set of powers between those three branches. So with that as the background, the question I ask is, have the three branches been doing exactly that over the last few decades? And I'd like to get your take on, has hyper-partisanship between the two parties put a rope around it and strung it up from a tree?
Well, absolutely. I mean, particularly if you're talking about judicial, I mean, how many, like, 5-4 decisions do you need in the United States Supreme Court to realize that people vote politically? I mean, people don't look at the Constitution. I mean, we saw that with Roe v. Wade, and I realize that most Americans don't understand. There's nothing in the Constitution about it. It should have never been, a judiciary question. But we see this in judiciaries because we see certain, whatever it's the San Francisco or the New York federal courts and stuff like that ruling one way, and then we see other federal courts ruling a completely different way because everybody interprets something. So let's start with the judiciary. Completely out there has been hyper partisan. Is the way that we've put people in there for interpreting laws. Obviously, Congress is always going to be hyper partisan. And the executive branch is always going to be hyper-partisan, whether it's the president is going to go. What was the earlier one? So you were asking if it's hyper-partisan. That was the last part. The early part is, are they doing their job?
Well, it was more of a case of, because of the hyper-partisanship, Democrat versus Republican, has it become just a fight between political parties that doesn't care about the congressional Senate divide? So in one
Yeah,
case,
I think to a large degree it is that way. Obviously, I mean, look at Joe Biden right there. Joe Biden of 20 years ago would disagree with everything of Joe Biden today, only because
And
his
he
party
has.
has adapted and changed, right? I mean, he wouldn't have. I mean, he's nothing. I mean, this is the guy who wrote the crime bill. Come on, Jack. 20 years ago, every Democrat believed in a secure border.
So with that hyper-partisanship, is there a way to dislodge it, or are we going to be stuck with it for X number of cycles? In your opinion?
No, it will be. Recently, we've seen 3 of the federal candidates, or at least 2 of them, Hassan and Pappas, talk about secure borders. Custer hasn't. I think a lot of Democrats realize that's not a winning issue. When we talk about everything that's going on with the gender stuff, I mean, it's a running joke on comedy shows. Like, people understand it's not a winning issue. They really do. The Leah Thompson and swimming as a woman. Like, most Democrats actually do believe it's ridiculous. So, I actually do believe that there is more common ground there. I think that there's the loudest people of the Democrat Party, of the liberals, that have been running them, but I think that they're losing their steam, particularly after the BLM riots and all of that stuff. I think people are starting to pull back and realize, this is stupid.
Okay, hold on just a sec.
Sure.
And that should take us through the rest. Okay, Rick, your turn.
Where I got lost.
So, back to me again?
Yeah, sure. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Something you were saying.
Here's a relatively easy one. We are over $30 trillion in debt. Yet when you look from the middle of the country west, most of the land in each of those states, to a very large degree, the further west you go, the larger the proportion of it goes, is owned by the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Should the federal government be in the land business?
No.
And would you be willing to sell it off to take down the debt?
Possibly. It's a complicated thing. I don't want to just auction everything off at once. But
Okay,
also...
Or I'll give you this.
Yeah.
Partially back to the states themselves.
Yes.
And partially back to private individuals.
Yes, and I wouldn't be opposed to giving back some to indigenous tribes as well. Also, the New Hampshire is east of the Mississippi, is the most per capita or percentage owned by the federal government.
Okay.
Now, that being said, they lease much of the land at Saway Mountains. We are like something like 50% owned by the federal government. But it is leased back to us to use as like ski resorts and things like that. So I definitely want the land to be usable. I'm not opposed to selling off some of the land, and I'm not opposed to giving some of the land to indigenous communities, but I don't like how much of the land that the federal government owns out west, 100%. I don't like all that land that's owned by them, particularly when it's just unincorporated land that's not national parks and stuff like that, and we're not using it to lease out to farmers, cattle, things like that. It needs to be used. If they're unwilling to use it, that's problematic. So I'm not opposed to everything that you're saying. I'm going to go yes, 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 and yes. But I don't like the idea, because I remember somebody running for governor. He had all this land that he wanted to sell from New Hampshire, and he said, "We're just all going to auction it as soon as I become governor." I also don't want everything like, we're not going to have a fire sale. But of course, I would just be a freshman congressman. I would have no power to have a fire sale. But so I also don't like that idea either. But I definitely want to decrease the amount of land that the federal government is just sitting on.
You ready, Mike?
You say, why should the federal government have any land apart from forts?
Well, also a good question. Why do they have lots of things that they seem to have? I think it's Ben Shapiro that talks about almost every time, whether programs or funds, that
You guys realize if we just auction off the land, Bill Gates owns it all, right?
Yeah, there's a state that's kicking up.
No, I mean he legitimately owns it all. If we did that,
it only seems to ratchet in one direction and nothing any. I mean, I'm old enough to remember people running for Congress. I'm going to fix this. They're not going to run me over, and either they lose or they win and they get run over.
I mean, I get into the same discussion with people about nuclear power. I mean, everybody says they want to build a nuclear power plant. We're building them. Bill Gates is building them right now in Wyoming. 2026, our first traveling wave reactor is going to be finished. The cost of $4 billion. Then he plans on building one a year after that. Then after that, he plans on building 2 a year, then 4 a year. And he will own all the power in the United States.
He's not that young.
Maybe
where's it going to go after that?
He's going to upload his consciousness into AI. I mean, you laugh.
I'm laughing because I'm sure he's working on that.
I'm sure he is. Elon is.
It'll blue screen.
I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Mike?
It will blue screen.
That was good.
That was really good. Yeah, no, probably.
It just keeps ratcheting up, and we never seem to get freedoms back.
So yes, we could sell the entire country to Bill Gates, but I will work against that.
Fair enough.
Okay, Mike, it's up to you, or should you take a pass again?
I would take a pass.
I think I'm done. Nothing is coming to mind at the moment. Sorry. You're the pro at this.
We've asked a lot of what Congress should and shouldn't do.
Yes, we have.
I've got a different question.
Sure.
One that you should know very well. Kelly Ayotte's Who's Gonna Read the Letter?
Who's going to read the letter?
The standing joke when Kelly Ayotte was a senator,
Mm-hmm.
that she never came back from D.C.
Yeah.
She always sent a letter.
Oh.
The standing joke at events was, who's going to read this letter?
You know, it's funny.
I didn't know that joke.
When everything was kind of, I get what you're saying. Yeah, you know, Sununu's brother used to do the same thing. I was sort of Judd Gray, quite frankly. I mean, not when he was a congressman, but when he was a senator, he did. You know, I saw her around a bunch about a year ago when I first started running. I would see her at everything. But that's when governor and senate was still kind of in flux. But now I haven't seen her for 6 months.
So, would you adopt that, or are you going to be back here?
Oh, I'm going to be here all the time. I hate DC. I got multiple properties in New Hampshire. I plan on being here I plan on flying in like Tuesday mornings and flying out like Thursday nights.
Like our president.
I mean, sometimes I'll go over to Reston, Virginia and hang out with Dave Hurst, but that's about it.
Now there's a name I haven't heard for.
Yeah,
How
well,
is he?
he's doing great. He's doing stock working out there and stuff like that. So he's about 25 minutes outside of DC. So,
Okay.
but DC itself, I hate. I have no interest in being in there.
Say hi to him
whatsoever.
for me.
Yeah,
I will.
would you live in DC while you were working there?
No. My plan is I want to get a house in Litchfield, right next to the airport. Just be in there 5 minutes in, 5 minutes out. That way too, you get all your freaking flyer miles and you get all those upgrades and stuff when you fly all the time. I'll just keep flying back and forth.
I don't think I'd
It's-
ever want to start flying again. I did 500,000 miles in the air. Used to get upgrades all the time.
It's an hour flight out of DCA.
Well, still, I would never want to do it.
I'm not gonna stay in DC in the weekends is terrible.
Ah, okay. All right.
Well, having established your aversion to the swamp, that's a good thing.
All right, I forgot. Is it Mike's turn or your turn? Because I just asked.
Mike's turn.
Are you got a
I
question?
don't have anything.
Well, actually, no. I just asked whether he would stay in DC.
Yeah, that's
the answer was
Oh,
no.
yes, fair
Very,
enough.
very resounding no, which I'm very happy to hear.
We go Monty Python. What's your favorite color?
Oh, please.
Blue. No, yellow.
It's probably blue, but it's gray if I'm wearing t-shirts. I love gray shirts. So.
Well, we have hit 8:30.
Okay.
I have one last question
Sure.
because I am the benevolent dictator of Granite Rock, so I always reserve the last question for myself.
That was handy.
Of course it is. Hey, rank hath its privileges once in a while. But like I said, I'm benevolent.
I heard that.
Too many people, when they say I'll be independent, they send them down there, and I've been to one former male congressman who was co-opted from New Hampshire, and I never let him forget about it. So I asked the following question. Do you have a kitchen cabinet that you are surrounding yourself with now that have no problem taking you apart for doing stupid things? Or to which you can say, okay, I'm only thinking stupid things, now tell me some smart things to do instead. To keep me on the straight and narrow.
I mean, I got my friends, my constant campaign manager, Sean Doherty, who's my probably main political advisor. But, you know, when it comes to like the question of like being influenced by party politics or anybody else, I don't think that there's any person in New Hampshire politics who's gone against the grain as much as I have. There has been no person who's been lambasted in this state as much as I have for opposing Kelly Ayotte, Jennifer Horn. She's filed false police reports against me because I've refused to go along with the grain. And that's back in the day when, do you remember when Jennifer Horn was the Tea Party candidate?
I certainly
Oh,
do.
yes.
I backed her in 2010. We're tempted. It was 2008, I think. When we
And do you remember?
2000 Tea Party started around 2008, really got a roll.
And when Ayotte was a Tea Party candidate?
Oh, no, she never was.
Oh,
No,
she
no.
was the Mama Grizzly endorsed by...
Oh, she pretended.
Yeah,
Okay, I worked for Ovid Lamontagne.
okay.
I worked for Mike Huckabee. I worked for Newt Gingrich. I worked for Donald Trump. I've been told so many times by people within our state party that I'm done. I've been threatened. I've been extorted. I had Ray Tweedy, on behalf of Jennifer Horn, come down and try to extort $10,000 out of me and told me I'd be arrested and my political career would be over. And you can Google this stuff. I mean, they made false police reports against me. I've never gone along with them and the greater them just because it made my life easy. I've opposed them. I opposed Jack Kimball when he went out and buddied up with the guy who ran for U.S. Senate there, Bill Binney. Remember when he buddied up with Bill Binney? I went out and attacked him for that. And I got crap on that. I got attacked by Joe Barton, now, who's now like one of my biggest supporters. So I have no problem coming out and being on the right side. And I've always been on the right side, quite frankly. When you look at the people that I've supported for every single office, I have always supported the right person. And I've never been with the wrong person, including Jennifer Warren.
Well, with that, normally after doing an interview, which is a micro interview,
No.
lasting just a few moments, I say thank you for spending a few moments with Granite Rock. But this time I get to say thank you for spending 2 hours
No.
with Granite Rock. And with that, we are finished.
Thank you.
Grok TV.